you're watching Aybil's Table. So there are a few things I wanted to say regarding the amazing work that is Parable of the Sower. And I made a video, but I don't think the video really touched on what I was actually trying to say, so I took it down if you saw it. So there were a few things that I really took away from Parable of the Sower when I first read it. I think it was maybe 2017, 2018. And I realized instantly how present the book was with us. The same with other works, maybe Handmaid's Tale and Orwell's 1984. We have a lot of books that have all seemed to arrive right at the same time in our history. It seems like we're living through a lot of interesting things. And because of that, especially with Butler's book and just how close it was to my life and how much the main character reminded me of myself, there were some things that I kind of wanted to point out. So that's what this video is for. So the first thing is how the world doesn't just crumble in Octavia Butler's work. There is an instance where she talks about what's happening. I think, I don't want to spoil too much, but I think it's like the politicians aren't doing their jobs as much anymore, and the police are for sale, and there's just this constant degrading of the society. They live in a community and they've had to, put up gates around the community, and every day seems like it's getting worse. People are working from home. And this is crazy, because even before COVID, there weren't as many people working from home. And, that the idea was, I think, to most people, not really even in our forefront. So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how much people, especially online, they talk about like they want this one big event to happen. They want this, whatever it is, aliens coming, or some political change or something, to make this kind of reality that we're living in kind of cease doing what it's doing, to stop. And after I read that book, I realized that that's not going to happen. There's not going to be a sudden stop. Even with COVID, the world kept moving, right? There's not going to be just one thing that's just going to be like, and everything grinds to a halt. People were still having to go to work. People were still having to make a living. People still having, to engage in the hospitals and police services and the resources that we either did or did not create in the time leading up to, just this kind of, I don't know what to call it, the pinnacle, I guess, the height of society when we started backtracking. And yeah, I think that's really interesting, because if the world's not going to stop, then what does that mean for what we're building? Like, if we're going to still have to keep working, and we're going to still have to engage in community with our neighbors, it seems like there are things that we should be working towards now, so whenever we do reach this point, that we're ready. And we haven't reached the point yet. It feels like we're going backwards, but society is still at a state where things are mostly normal for Americans. We still can go to the grocery store. Things are still shelved. We can still drive our cars. Yeah, so most of those things are really normal. still for now. I do some work with some community folks, and there are a lot of there are so many ways that we could be adjusting ourselves and adjusting how we live in community with each other to prepare for the things that are to come. You know, we have to think about um, being more proactive about our local farmers, being more proactive about community gardening, being more proactive about knowing who our neighbors are, being more aware of techniques like transformative justice, which is something I'm learning about now, and just ways that we can interact with people without having um, to use these like very, I want to use the word judgmental, but the very punitive um, systems that we're used to. There are ways that we can practice learning how to forgive, and there are ways that we can practice communicating with each other so we understand that when people do something wrong, they have a way to unlearn that behavior and work themselves back into community. There are all of these things that are being practiced by so many different groups. There is a change coming. Um, it has to come. I think it's inevitable. But I really do feel like it's more of something that's being broken and something being born. And I am looking forward to seeing what can be born underneath the rubble. You know, if there's already a foundation, if there's already a structure being built underneath, you know, whatever is crumbling, then I think the community can go forward with less repercussions, with less of a harsh, you know, scrambling than trying to build something from scratch. The second lesson, kind of in the same vein, was that God has changed. And when I think about that quote, I think about the fact that even through all this destruction and through this, you know, this train that's going to keep driving on or off the rails, that's just life. Change. The only inevitability of life is really change, which means that that's something we can have faith in. You know, sometimes it's difficult to have faith. Sometimes it's difficult to have something to believe in. I think people love consistency. Consistency makes people feel comfortable. We want something to be familiar, because if it's familiar, that we can predict it, and if we can predict it, then we're safe, and if we're safe, we don't have to really think about it too much. But that's not life. I think some people have existed in more change than others, and so people like that, such as me, I grew up in a consistent change. My life was constantly changing, and it was something that I resisted because I hated change. I hated knowing that it was going to change, instead of just embracing it and knowing that it was going to be just the state of life, you know, that was just the way life operates. Instead of acknowledging that, I was always trying to rail against it and try to figure out how to keep things the same. But that's not how it works. And there's beauty in that. There's beauty because everything needs to change. Everything has a cycle. Really, my last thought from the books, it's time to be prepared. We are not really, we weren't really ready, and I don't think that people started being more aware, myself included, of who was in power and how power was being mishandled until COVID, really. I have always had a weird relationship with how uh, we do this back and forth tug of war in this country, and I have a bit of a cynicism. I think that's just something that I carry with me. Um, but being cynical doesn't mean you're prepared. Being cynical just means that like you you hold suspicion in your mind, right? You're aware of people and what they can inflict on you, and you're kind of aware of of intentions and things like that. But that doesn't mean that when they slap you or when you hit you, you know what I mean? Like you'll be like, this person can, and this person might, but that doesn't mean that when it happens, that your face is ready. So I think really COVID prepared a lot of people and woke a lot of people up, and without it, I don't think we would be as ready for whatever changes are coming. Um, and I wonder about them, but I think that also is a form of control to just be like, oh man, I wonder if I can to get the jump, to get the jump on pain or to get the jump on change. We have to be prepared, but being prepared doesn't mean that everything's going to be accounted for, that we're going to know all the twists and turns that are going to happen. We have to be prepared, and we have to do the best that we can, and we have to leave the rest. There's this little funny quote from a kid show that used to be on PBS, Dragon Tales, and they'd say, "Do your best and leave the rest. It'll all come right someday or night." That's all you can do, I think. I think Butler's work, it speaks, of, because it goes back and forth in time, and the main character, her daughter is estranged from her. We see, her trying to do her best, but we don't know if it comes right. And there's such a weird, haunting kind of mystery about how it ends, because obviously the books weren't finished. And maybe that's for the best, because some people treat the works like there's some sort of like guidebook, and they are to a certain extent, but they're more so, as she stated, these are the things that are going to happen if we don't make adjustments, and obviously the adjustments weren't made. So that's not really, that's statistics, that's strategy, that's just being aware of how the world works and being able to see it. And it may have been some sort of other foresight that she had, which is very possible. But people use the works, like that, and I think maybe that they should not. Because we don't know what happened, and the ending has not been written for any of us. I think there's still time to do change, there's still time to make change, there's still time, and that is my hope. So I hope y'all have a good evening. I hope this has been interesting. I would love to hear your thoughts or your takeaways from Octavia Butler's work. She left us with something I do appreciate. So would love to hear from you. Thanks for watching.